Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. Today's tutorial is giving cute, comfy, and crochet core. We're making a short sleeve baby doll top with cinched V neckline and airy texture featuring the Suzette stitch on top and moss stitch for a soft, flowy finish. It's flattering, fun to make, and just the right mix of relaxed and romantic. If you're here, welcome. I share modern crochet patterns and tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday, so tell a friend, tap the bell, and subscribe so you never miss an upload. And if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to support the channel and keep these tutorials free. So without further ado, here's how to make your own crochet baby doll top. For today's project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 365 grams of yarn. That's 680 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5.5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and stick around to the end to hear about this week's pattern giveaway. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. This tutorial is made for a size small. You can adjust it for your size, and I explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Then we're all going to grab our 5.5mm hook, then start off by making an odd number chain that starts 1 inch underneath our underarm down to our underbust, so roughly where an underwire would sit. I need roughly 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 15. Now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. That chain 1 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. Now into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with our first Suzette stitch. And that's just going to be into that chain that we blocked off, a single crochet, and into that same chain with a double crochet. And that is our first Suzette stitch set. Now, after we complete a Suzette stitch set, we're always going to skip that following stitch because that double crochet that we did counts as that stitch. If we work into there, we will accidentally be increasing, so we're going to skip one, then into the next, another single and a double. Let's do the next Suzette stitch a little bit slower. So remember, skip that stitch, into that next, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, that is our first single crochet, then into that same chain, yarn over, same chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, and that is our double. From here, we're going to continue to skip a stitch into the next as Suzette stitch until we all have 2 chains left. We've made our way down with our row 1, leaving the last 2 chains. Now into that last chain, we're going to do an increase. So what we're going to do is skip that following chain, which is per usual, then into that last, we're going to insert starting with 1 single crochet, then into that same last chain with a half double crochet, then again into that same last chain with a double crochet. And that is our increase. We should have 2 more stitches than chains that we made. Now for this portion, every even number row will not have any increases or decreases, so just to get that row started, we're going to chain 1, that's our turning chain, and flip our work. Into that first stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert with our first Suzette stitch. So insert with a single, into that same stitch with a double, and per usual, skip a stitch, into that next with a single and a double. Now we're going to continue on with this until we all have 2 stitches left, and just as a really quick tip, we do want to make sure that each of our Suzette stitch sets are worked into our previous row's single crochet, and we can tell that it's a single crochet because it's a little bit shorter than that next stitch. So we just completed a set. We are going to skip that following stitch, which is per usual, and we can tell that that's a double crochet because it is a little bit taller, into the next with our Suzette stitch set. Now I will meet everyone back when we have 2 stitches left. We're now at the end of our row 2. Now how we're going to close off a row with no increases, we're going to yarn over. Into that last stitch from our previous row, we're going to insert with just 1 half double crochet. Now as a really quick tip, if it looks like we just have 1 stitch left, if you flip your work over, that first stitch is a little tucked underneath, but it is there. So just yarn over, skip that following stitch, that's per usual, and into that last stitch, we're going to insert with just 1 half double crochet. So insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and now at the end of our row 2, we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now from here, it is going to be a repeat of these 2 previous rows. So just to make sure we have it down, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, do our Suzette stitch all the way down until we have 2 stitches left so we can increase together. We've made our way down with our row 3, leaving the last 2 stitches. We are going to skip that following stitch, and into the last we're going to do the same increase that we did for our row 1. So into the last stitch from our previous row, insert with a single, same last stitch with a half double, and same last stitch with a double crochet. Since this is an increase row, we should end up with 2 more stitches than our previous row. Then to do our even number row, chain 1, flip our work, Suzette stitch all the way down, and when we have just 2 stitches left, close off the row with 1 half double crochet. We have just completed our first 4 rows. What we're going to do from here is continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we now have a portion that can reach from mid underarm over to the front of our body, so roughly where a bra strap or tank top strap would lay. Then I'll meet everyone back right after an odd number row so that we'll be along the top, then we can do the shoulder together from there. So we have just completed our underarm portion. Now I did a total of 7 rows. This width is just about 2.5 inches or 6 centimeters. My increase height is just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, we're all going to make an even numbered chain that reaches the top of our shoulder. So we all want to make sure that we're placing the tail end still at 1 inch underneath our underarm, just so that our armhole doesn't get too big or too small. Then make our even number chain. I went ahead and made a chain 16. That's roughly 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. Now from here, we're just going to Suzette stitch all the way down. So once we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. And into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with our first Suzette stitch and just continue on with our Suzette stitch all the way down our chain, then also all the way down our stitches, continuing on until we have 2 stitches left, then close off the row with a half double crochet. Our first shoulder row is completed. Now what we're going to do from here is just continue to repeat this row so the shoulder won't have any increases or decreases until we now have a portion that can reach from mid underarm all the way over to the side of the base of our neck. Then I'll meet everyone back right after an even number row so that we'll be along the bottom. Then we can work on the neckline together from there. We have just completed our shoulder. I now have a total of 14 rows. This width is just about 4.5 inches or 12 centimeters. Now what we're going to do from here is our neckline. So we're all going to want to put this up to ourselves and insert our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch from the top where we'd like for the neckline to start. I'd like for mine to start maybe a little bit below mid-chest, so I went ahead and inserted my stitch marker into the 24th stitch from the top. That's just about 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters, but if you would like to cover more, insert your stitch marker higher, or if you'd like to show a little bit more, insert your stitch marker lower. Then all we're going to do is our Suzette stitch all the way up, leaving 2 stitches right before our stitch marker. We've made our way down, leaving 2 stitches right before our stitch marker stitch. Now all we're going to do is just close off the row with 1 half double crochet in that stitch that's right before our stitch marker stitch, so everything's per usual. Now from here, we're just going to do another Suzette stitch row, chain 1, flip our work, Suzette stitch all the way down, closing off the row with a half double again. So we've just completed our first 2 neckline rows. All we're going to do from here is continue to repeat this row until we now have a neckline that reaches across our chest over to the other side of the base of our neck. Then again, I'll meet everyone back along the top, so right after an odd number row, so we can do that shoulder together as well. I have just completed the width of my neckline. I have a total of 29 rows. My width is now 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters. Now we're all going to do our shoulder. And if you're worried about the neckline, we are going to add a drawstring to the middle of it to help it cinch. But before we do that, we need to finish the piece first. So the next thing we're going to do is the shoulder. So since we all should have ended along the top, we're all going to make a chain for the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we got started on the neckline. Now I skipped a total of 24 stitches. So on this side, I made a chain 24, but now what we're going to do from here, once we have that chain, is just do our following Suzette stitch rows. No increases, no decreases. Quick tip, we should have the same amount of stitches as our first shoulder portion. We're just going to continue on with that for the same amount of rows as our first shoulder. Once we have that completed, we should all end along the bottom. Then I'll meet everyone back so we can complete our underarm portion together. I have just completed my shoulder. I now have a total of 36 rows. My width is now 11 inches or 28 centimeters. Now we're going to do our underarm portion. So what we're going to do is start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that led up to our shoulder. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a chain 16. So along this side, counting from the top, I inserted my stitch marker into the 16th stitch. Now to do our following Suzette stitch row, we're going to chain 1 since we should all be along the bottom. Flip our work, do our Suzette stitch all the way up, leaving 4 stitches right before our stitch marker stitch. We made our way up with our first underarm row, leaving 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches right before our stitch marker stitch. Now we're all going to skip that following stitch, then do a decrease of 3 double crochets. So yarn over, skip that following stitch, into the next, we're going to insert, pull through. Into that next stitch, pull through, then into that next stitch, which should be the last stitch right before our stitch marker, pull through to get a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook. From here, we're going to yarn over, pull through the first 4 loops, then yarn over, pull through 2. And now our first underarm row is completed. Our following row isn't going to have any increases or decreases, so chain 1, flip our work, Suzette stitch all the way down, making sure we close off the row with 1 half double crochet. Then just do our decrease together again at the end of this row. Chain 1, flip our work, Suzette stitch all the way up, leaving the last 4 stitches, then I'll meet you back. We are nearly complete with our first 1, 2, 3 underarm rows. We should have made our way up, leaving the last 4 stitches again. Now to do our decrease, we're going to yarn over. Skip that following stitch and into the next, insert pull through, next, pull through, and next, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook again. Yarn over, pull through 4, yarn over, pull through 2. From here, all we're going to do is continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of total rows that we did for our first underarm portion. Once we have that, do a chain up of 1 and cut. We have just completed our underarm portion. I now have a total of 12.5 inches or 32 centimeters. Now from here, we're going to do our back panel, and that's going to be done pretty much the same way as the front, just without the neckline cutout, so I'm just going to talk you guys through it. We're all going to start by making the same chain that we made for the front panel's underarm portion, do the same exact underarm portion. Then we're going to make the same chain that we made that led up to our shoulders, then just do Suzette stitch rows with no increases, no decreases, for the same amount of rows that we have from our first shoulder row all the way across to our last shoulder row. Once we have that, we're going to complete the back panel with the same underarm portion that we just did for the front panel. Then our back panel will be completed. Then I'll meet everyone back so we can seam it all up together. We have just completed both our front and our back panel. Now we're going to seam up the shoulders together. Now to seam up the shoulders, all we're going to do is place our front panel on top of our back panel, insert our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and we're going to do a chain up of 1 just to secure. Then all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet in through every side row within both the front and the back panel at the same time. So finding our first side row within the front panel, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop, insert, first side row within the back panel, find that top loop, and insert with a single crochet, and let's do that again. This is my next side row within the front panel, so find that top loop, next side row within the back panel, insert into that top loop, and single crochet everything together. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into within the front panel. Do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So we have just completed our shoulder seams. Now we're going to seam up our sides. So we're going to make sure that our work is still flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we just completed is still along the outside. Then insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. We're going to pull our working yarn through and do a chain up of 1 to secure. Then finding our first stitch into the front panel, insert, first stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. Once more, next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet, and continue on with this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, then repeat on the other side. So now that everything is all seamed up, we're about to get started on our sleeve. So first things first, we're going to make sure that all of our seams are flipped along the inside. Then we're going to insert our hook into the stitch that we have that's nearest to our side seam within the armhole. Now we're going to do a single crochet row, so we're going to pull through and do a chain up of 1. Now working up our underarm portion, what we're going to do is alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, and we're going to start with 2 single crochets. This is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. So there's 1 into that same top loop with a second single crochet. Now into our following side row, which this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1. Let's do that again. Into our following side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 2 single crochets. So there's 1, same top loop with a second, then into my following with just 1 single crochet. We're going to continue on with this until we reach the shoulder portion. Then once we do, just put 1 single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up and over. Then once we reach the side rows along the back, we're going to again alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 2. Once we've made our way all the way around, slip stitch into that chain space, then I'll meet everyone back. We have just made our way all the way around with our single crochet row. Now just as a really quick tip, once we have slip stitched into that chain space, it will form another stitch, but that stitch is just the slip stitch to connect the beginning to the end of the row. That won't actually count as a stitch. But once when it's connected, all we're going to do is chain 1 and flip our work. Now we're going to do more Suzette stitch rows, but we are now going to start and end the row with 5 single crochets, and that's going to be 5 for everyone no matter what size we're making. So into that first available stitch, insert with our first single crochet, and we're all going to work in with a total of 5. So into that next stitch with our second, next stitch with our third, next with our fourth, next with our fifth. Now into that following stitch, we're now going to do our Suzette stitches. So into that next available stitch, insert with a single and a double crochet, and per usual, skip a stitch into the next, insert with a single and a double, and we're going to continue to do our normal Suzette stitches all the way around, leaving the last 6 stitches. Then I'll meet everyone back. We've made our way around with our row 2, and we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stitches left. Now from here, we're just going to close off our row with 5 single crochets. So right after that last Suzette stitch, we are going to skip that following, then into the next with our first single crochet, then 1 single crochet into the rest of our stitches, which should be 5 single crochets for everyone. Now that we're at the end of our row 2, we should all have the same amount of stitches as our previous single crochet row. We're now going to slip stitch it into that chain space. Remember that that slip stitch doesn't actually count as a stitch. Chain 1 and flip our work. Now we're starting and ending our rows off with single crochets, just so that we have a little bit less fabric here at the underarm, so that once we have it on, it doesn't have as big of a buckle. Now we're going to continue to do our Suzette stitch rows, but now we're going to do some decreases because we want this to get nice and snug around our arm. So to get started on everyone's row 3, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now we're all going to start with a decrease of 2 single crochets. So into that first stitch, we're going to insert our hook, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and we're going to do another decrease of 2 right next to that. So into that next stitch, pull through, next stitch, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. Then for everyone, we're going to do 3 single crochets because we all still want a total of 5 single crochets before we get started on our Suzette stitch. So we have 1, 2, which was our decreases, into that next with our third, next, which should be the top of our Suzette stitch, with our fourth, next with our fifth. Then right after we have our technically 5 single crochets, we're now going to skip 1 stitch and then do our Suzette stitch all the way around. So into that next stitch, which should be our next Suzette stitches double crochet, you can tell that's a little bit taller, into the next with a single and a double, and continue on with our Suzette stitch per usual until we all have 7 stitches left. We have now made our way around with our row 3, and we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches left. Now we're going to close off our row with our 5 single crochets. So what we're all going to do is directly into that next stitch, insert with 1, next stitch with our second single, next stitch with our third single, and we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches left. So now into the next 2, we're going to insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. That is our first decrease of 2 singles. Now into the last 2 as well. So into that second to last, pull through, last, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3. And now our row 3 is completed. So just to finish it off, slip stitch into that chain space that we made when we got started on this row. Everyone's row 3 is now completed. We should all have 4 less stitches than our previous row. And for our even number rows, we aren't going to do any increases or decreases. So let's do that together. We're all going to chain 1 and flip. Now we're going to start with 5 single crochets. So just into that first stitch with 1, into that next with our second, next with our third, next with our fourth, next with our fifth. Then we're going to skip a stitch into the next with our Suzette stitch and continue on with our Suzette stitches until we have 5 stitches left. Our row 4 is nearly completed. We all should have left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches left. Now we're just going to close off the row with 5 single crochets. So just into that following stitch with 1 single, next with our second, next with our third, next with our fourth, and next with our fifth. Now slip stitch into that chain space, chain 1, and flip our work. Now we all should have completed our first 4 rows together. We're going to now continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until the armhole that we have becomes nice and snug on our arm. Then I'll meet everyone back right after an even number rows so that we can get on with the length of our sleeve. We have just completed the first little bit of our shoulder portion of our sleeve. I currently have a total of 10 rows, and this is as fitted as I would like for this portion of the sleeve to be. Now from here, I'm just going to continue to repeat our previous row, so that was our row without any increases or decreases, until we have a portion of our sleeve that can lay completely horizontal on our arm once when it's worn. Then I'll meet everyone back right after an even number row, then we can work on the length from there. We are back and our shoulder portion is now completed. I now have a total of 16 rows. My underarm length that I have right here is just about 3.5 inches or 9 centimeters. Now we're going to do just a little bit of the length. So this is basically just going to be Suzette stitch rows, no increases, no decreases, and without the single crochet detail. So what we're going to do from here is chain 1 and flip, then do our Suzette stitch detail all the way around. Then I will meet everyone back when we all have a total of 3 stitches left. We've made our way around with our first regular Suzette stitch row, and we should all have 3 stitches left. Now we should all have 3 stitches left because our Suzette stitches always need to be worked in an odd number of stitches, but our previous row was worked in an even, so we're now going to make it odd. What we're going to do is yarn over, skip that third to last, and into the last 2 stitches, a decrease of 2 half double crochets. So inserting our hook into that second to last stitch, pull through, into that last stitch, pull through for a total of 4 loops on our hook, then yarn over, pull through all 4. Now this row should have 1 less stitch than our previous row, and now we're going to slip stitch it into that chain space that we made when we got started on this row. Now this following row is just going to be a normal Suzette stitch row, so chain 1, flip our work, and into the top of that first stitch, Suzette stitch, and make our way all the way around until we all have 2 stitches left. So we've just made our way around, leaving the last 2 stitches. Now we're just going to close off the row with 1 half double crochet, and at the end of this row we should have the same amount of stitches as our previous row. Now slip stitch into that chain space that we made when we got started on this row, chain 1, flip our work, and now we're just going to repeat this row, so no increases, no decreases, until we'd like for the sleeve to decrease just a little bit more. So roughly right now I'm at my bicep, so once when I get further down to my elbow, I would like for it to be just a little bit more fitted. So I'll meet you guys back right after an even number row just so I can show you how we can do our decrease. I have just completed the length of my sleeve, and we're going to still do the length of our sleeve, but now I want it to decrease just a smidge. Now the decreases can be done into any row, into any sequence of rows that you would like. You guys get to pick how snug you would like your sleeve to get. I'm just going to show you guys how to do the decrease rows. So just to let y'all know, I have a total of 22 rows. My underarm length is just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters. Now we're going to do our first decrease row. So that's going to start off the same as usual. So chain 1, flip our work. We're going to Suzette stitch all the way around, leaving the last 4 stitches, and then I'll meet everyone back. We've made our way around, leaving the last 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. Now we're just going to close out the row with a decrease of 3 doubles. So yarn over, skip that following stitch, into the third to last, insert, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through the first 4, then yarn over, pull through 2, and that is our decrease. Now we're going to slip stitch into that chain space that we made when we got started on this row, chain 1, and continue. Now, like I said, this is the sleeve length. You can continue on with our Suzette stitch rows until you get the total length of the sleeve that we want, decreasing into any row that you guys feel fit. But once we have the entirety of the length of the sleeve that we like completed, I'll meet you back just so we can close it off with a single crochet row to clean it up. The length of my sleeve is completed. I have a total of 27 rows. Now, right after this last row, I'm just going to chain 1, do a single crochet row just to clean up the edge of my sleeve, and do a chain up of 1 and cut. Then I'll meet you back. So now that our single crochet row is completed along the edge of our sleeve, we are all done. Now we're going to repeat on the other side. So now that our sleeves are completed, we're going to get started on the length of our peplum. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up. We're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece, and we're going to do a single crochet row. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and all we're going to do is put 1 single crochet into every side row. So just finding our first side row, this is mine right here, I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. This is my following side row, find that top loop and insert with 1. We're just going to continue with 1 single crochet into every side row, making our way all the way around. Now, as a really quick tip, this single crochet row will be as wide as this portion can stretch. So if it's a little too tight, reduce some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, reduce some stitches with a tighter grip. Then I'll meet you back at the end of this row. So we are back. Our single crochet row is completed. Now once we have slip stitched into that chain space, the next thing we're going to do is make an even number chain that we like for the bottom to be. So you can make this as long or as short as you'd like. I'd like for mine to roughly reach about my hips. So I'm going to start by making a chain 30, and that's just about 8 inches or 20 centimeters. Now we're going to do a moss stitch row all the way back. So now that we have our chain, we're all going to block off that last chain, and we're going to start with a chain of 2. That first chain is going to count as a turning chain, and that second chain is actually going to count as the first stitch for this row. Then we're going to do a single crochet into the 4th chain from our hook. So here's 1, here's 2, that 3rd is the one that we blocked off, and here's our 4th. Into that 4th, insert with just 1 single crochet. Now for this row, we should have 2 stitches. That first is that chain space, that second is the top of that single crochet. Then from here, all we're going to do is chain 1, skip a stitch into the next with a single crochet. Now we should all have 4 stitches for this row. There's 1, which is that chain space. It might be a little bit hard to see, but it is there. That single crochet is 2, that chain space is 3, that single crochet is 4. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next. We're going to continue doing this until we reach the end of the row. We've just made our way down with our row 1. Now we're going to connect it into the base, and the base is that single crochet row. So how we're going to connect it is just finding that first available stitch, insert with a slip stitch, and now our first row is completed. Now remember that that slip stitch into the base doesn't actually count as a stitch. Now the following row in our row sequence is going to be another moss stitch row. So how we're going to do that is we first need to work our way up to the following row. So all we're going to do is slip stitch into that following available stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch. Remember that that slip stitch into the base still doesn't count as a stitch, and flip our work. Now whenever we're doing our moss stitch that starts along the base, working our way down towards the edge, we're always going to start with a chain 1 first. Then we're going to skip that first stitch from our previous row, which should be a single crochet from our previous row, making sure we're not looking at those slip stitches into the base. Then single crochet into that next stitch, which should be our chain space. So skip that first single crochet into the next with a single crochet. Now so far for our row 2, you should have 2 stitches, which is that chain space and single crochet. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, which is our single crochet, and into the next, which is our chain space, insert with a single. And we're now going to continue to do this until we reach the end of the row. We're now at the end of our row 2. We do want to make sure that we inserted our last single crochet into that chain space from our previous row, giving us the same amount of stitches as chains that we made. We aren't doing any increases or decreases so far. Now this is going to be a 3-row repeat, so our following row is going to be a single crochet row. So since we're along the outer edge, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and simply put 1 single crochet into every stitch and chain space until we reach the base. Then I'll meet you back. We are back and our first 3 rows are nearly completed. We're now going to connect it into the base. Now the way that we're going to connect the rest of the rows into the base is going to be a little bit different than the first one because we want it to ruffle up a little bit. So whenever we're connecting it back into the base, we're going to slip stitch into that same stitch that our previous row was coming out of. So into this occupied stitch, I'm going to insert with a slip stitch. And now our row 3 is completed. Now, like I said, it is a 3-row repeat. Since it is an odd number of row repeats, sometimes our moss stitch row is going to start along the outer edge, like how our first one did, or it's going to start along the base, like how this one's about to. So I'm just going to do the following 3 rows, make sure we have all the variations down. Let you do the rest on your own. So to get started on the following row, we do need to work our way up to the following row. We're going to slip stitch up that following stitch into the base. Remember, it doesn't count as a stitch. Flip our work. Now, whenever we're doing a moss stitch row that starts along the base, we're going to start with a chain 1, skip that first stitch from our previous row, making sure we're not counting any of those slip stitches. We're going to skip that first stitch, into the next, insert with a single crochet, giving us the first 2 stitches of this row. Again, chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until we reach the end of the row. Our row 4 is now completed. Now to get started on a moss stitch row that starts along the outer edge, we're going to start with a chain 2. Remember that first chain is going to count as our turning chain. That second chain is going to count as our first stitch for the following row and flip our work. Then we're going to skip that first stitch from our previous row and into the next, insert with a single crochet. That should give us the first 2 stitches for this row. From here, continue to chain 1, skip a stitch, single crochet into the next until you reach the end of the row. Now, just as a really quick tip, when it comes to doing our second moss stitch row, each of our single crochets should be worked into our previous row's chain space to get the texture that we want. We have just completed our row 5. Now to connect it into the base together again, remember we're going to slip stitch it into that same stitch that our previous row is worked out of. So into this occupied stitch, insert with a slip stitch, does not count as a stitch. Then since we're here to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, flip our work. Now our following row is going to be a single crochet row, so simply put 1 single crochet into every stitch to reach the end of the row. So we have just completed our first 6 rows. All we're going to do from here is just continue to repeat these 6 rows, making our way all the way around. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I'll meet you back so we can seam it all up together. So we have just made our way all the way around with the bottom half of our piece. We're now going to seam it up. Now this seam is going to be done exactly the same way as our side seams. So just to make sure that we all have it down, we're going to make sure that our work is slipped wrong side out. Then do our same exact single crochet seam that we did for the sides. When we don't have any more stitches left to work into, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So we are back. We're now ready to get started on the collar. So right before we actually do the collar, we're all going to want to find that middle row that we have within the front panel, and we're going to insert our stitch marker into the top of the stitch and not into the side row because we are going to be working into the top of that side row. So all I did was found my first 2 neckline rows on both sides and just counted in at the same time. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and my 8th side row is my middle row. Make sure you're inserting your stitch mark into the front of the stitches and not into the edge of the row. And now we can get started on the single crochet row for the collar. So what we're going to do is a single crochet row. I'm going to start by inserting my hook into the stitch that's nearest to my shoulder seam within the neckline and just start making my way down with 1 single crochet into every stitch. Then once we reach our first side row, I'll meet everyone back so they can work into there together. We've just made our way down with our single crochets and we are now at our first side row. So what we're going to do is alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row, starting with 2. So into my first side row, this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. This is my following side row. Insert in through there with 1 single crochet. Then once we made our way all the way around with this single crochet row, slip stitch into that chain space and do a chain up of 1 and cut. So now that our single crochet row is completed, we're now just going to work on the cinch. So what we're going to do is start by making a chain the length that we'd like for the bow to be. I made a chain of 90, that's just about 24 inches or 60 centimeters. Now, since we know where the middle row of the front panel is, all we're going to do is weave our chain up and back down for the cinch. So what we're going to do is insert our hook underneath that top stitch that we have for our middle row. So this is that Suzette stitch. Just underneath that entire cluster, we're going to bring our hook underneath and through the other side. We're going to insert our yarn onto our hook and pull, but making sure that we don't pull all the way through because we do need some slack on both sides. Then taking a look at our middle row, we're going to find the row on the other side of it. It doesn't matter which one you do first. We're just going to find our following row. This is mine right here. I'm going to find those little gaps that we have in between our middle row and that following row. And then I'm just going to weave my hook up through each of those gaps until we reach the top. Now once when our hook is in through here, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook and just pull all the way through. Then repeat on the other side. And now that our chain is through both sides, all we're going to do is take the chain ends and we're going to pull down while holding the top in place, and then we're going to tie our bow. And once we have that, we are all done. The last thing we have to do is simply weave in all of our ends. And there you have it, y'all. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Thanks for sticking to the end. Enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us if there's a movie or TV show you watch every summer. My summer go-to is Jurassic Park. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!